Yes, Master Gimli, he saw me, but in other guise than you see me here. If that will aid him, then I have done ill, but I do not think so. To know that I have lived and walked the earth was a blow to his heart, I deem, for he knew it not till now. The eyes in Orthanc did not see through the armor of Theoden, but Sauron has not forgotten Isildur, and the sword of Elendil. Now in the very hour of his great designs, the ear of Isildur and the sword are revealed, for I showed the blade reforged to him. He is not mighty yet that he is above fear. Nay, doubt ever gnaws him.
Sauron, the Lord of the Rings, former Maya of Aule, servant and emissary of Morgoth. In both the second and third ages of the world, he is the greatest threat to Middle-earth and those within it. A self-proclaimed King of Men, King of Kings and Lord of the Earth. A daunting figure, of course, but I have been asked if the Dark Lord was afraid of the Chieftain of the Dúnedain, Aragorn, descendant of great lords of men, and one destined to be king of the reunited kingdom. This video will explain why I say that the great power residing in Mordor not only knew fear as his master of old did, but that he rightly feared this mortal leader of men. To answer a question like this, I feel it is important to get out of the mindset of power rankings in Tolkien's Legendarium. Many like to discuss hypothetical situations, confrontations and battles, some already deciding the victor in such imaginary contests due to the race of the combatants. This isn't a video discussing a battle between these figures, but I just want to say that it absolutely does not matter that Sauron is a Maya and Aragorn is a mortal man. Yes, Sauron is an immortal being, existing before the world itself was made, of the same order of the Valar, but of less degree. He has existed for thousands and thousands of years, taking part in the music of the Ainur, and holding a power of will we cannot fathom. And by the time Aragorn is deep in the conflict of the Third Age against Sauron in the War of the Ring, he is certainly old for a man, but his age compared to Sauron cannot really be compared. Decades against an existence dating to before time was counted. This has nothing to do with Sauron fearing Aragorn. I have personally always loathed looking at Tolkien's works through the lens of classes or stats in a role-playing game. Aragorn wields power, a different kind of power to Sauron, one that the Dark Lord not only feared, but was wise to fear. Just like his master Morgoth, Sauron has divine origins, but knows and understands fear all too well. This is because the power he holds and the position he has in the world can be removed from him. Sauron's great fear in the Third Age is that someone will use his ring against him before it is returned to him. Forget what adaptations of the Lord of the Rings tell you. The ring does not answer to Sauron alone. There are those set against Sauron with the strength to wield the ring. In some cases, perhaps not with the time to master it before Sauron sought to take it from them, but all with the strength of will to set themselves against Sauron and his empire with their own authority. Figures like Gandalf and Galadriel, certainly, but Aragorn too.
Now, Sauron knows all this, and he knows that this precious thing which he lost has been found again. But he does not yet know where it is, or so we hope, and therefore he is now in great doubt. For if we have found this thing, there are some among us with strength enough to wield it. That too he knows. For do I not guess rightly, Aragorn, that you have shown yourself to him in the Stone of Orthanc?
Let's take a look at Aragorn and his position. He was the Chieftain of the Dúnedain, the Chieftains being the hereditary rulers of the Rangers of the North. After the fragmentation of the Kingdom of Arnor in the north, 3 kingdoms replaced it. Arthedain was one of them, and the Witch King of Angmar made war, leading to the abandonment of this kingdom in the year 1974 of the Third Age. He was driven out a year later, but the kingdom of Arthedain did not return, and those Dúnedain of Arnor became the Rangers of the North. The last official king of Arthedain was Arvidui, whose name literally means last king. It was said that he was named by the seer Malbeth, with Arvidui being the foreseen last king of this kingdom, for good or ill. Good if he would be the one to reunite the kingdoms of the Dúnedain, Arnor and Gondor, meaning Arthedain would no longer need to exist. Ill if he would fail, and the kingdom of Arthedain would end in ruin. Such it was that the latter became true, and Arvidui fled the north when the Witch King invaded, dying in the bay of Forchel. His son, Aranarth, did not claim the title of king, but of chieftain, ruling those that remained. Make no mistake, he was a king in all but name, of royal and noble lineage. Aranarth and his descendants can all be traced back to Isildur himself, that figure who held many titles, King of Gondor alongside his brother, Anarion. Briefly, the High King of the Dúnedain. That includes being King of Arnor. And those who know their history will of course recognise Isildur as being the first figure to claim the One Ring of Sauron, following the Dark Lord's defeat in the battle with the High Kings Gil-galad and Elendil, Isildur's father. A battle which ended the War of the Last Alliance in the Second Age. Aragorn's lineage and nobility are not up for debate, but I don't think it's an overstatement to say that Aragorn is the best that the race of men has to offer in the Third Age of Middle-earth. He shares the nobility and strength of will of those who challenged Sauron directly in the past being the previous age, thousands of years before the events of the Lord of the Rings, before the great decline of the kindred of men. And while much time has passed between Isildur and Aragorn, he is not one that Gandalf is speaking of when he speaks of men of the West mingling with lesser men. Aragorn is a representative of Westerness. He has the blood of Númenor running true within him. I think it's been established that even as a mortal man, Aragorn is closely linked to some of Sauron's greatest enemies in his very nature. But why else would one from an order that existed before Arda itself fear him? Aragorn wields the sword reforged. Narsil, the sword that cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand, is now wielded by Aragorn as Andúril. I detail the importance of this sword in my video of Andúril, the Sword of Kings. This sword is beyond a weapon. It is a symbol of the prospect of mankind in Middle-earth, defiance in the face of Sauron's tyranny, the return of the king in a kingdom that has been without one for 1,000 years. Once broken, representing the decline of men in the world, it has been made whole again. It is revered, inspiring, a symbolic crown for a crownless king, and does not only rekindle hope, but it strikes fear in the very heart of Sauron's servants, and Sauron himself. Aragorn doesn't just carry a blade with him, but an inherent power, majesty and presence. He can rally men to fight for him, without the need for a ring of power. Imagine the daunting authority of Aragorn if he did wield the one. A prime example of Aragorn's power is when he meets Eomer of Rohan, one who later becomes a king himself, a proud and noble warrior. At first, Eomer is hostile to Aragorn and his companions, Gimli and Legolas. Aragorn reveals his true name and the blade that was broken. Eomer is overwhelmed and is awestruck alongside the riders of Rohan. Aragorn threw back his cloak. The elven sheath glittered as he grasped it, and the bright blade of Andúril shone like a sudden flame as he swept it out. "Elendil," he cried, "I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and am called Elisar, the Elfstone, Dúnedain, the heir of Isildur, Elendil's son of Gondor. Here is the sword that was broken and is forged again. Will you aid me or thwart me? Choose swiftly." Tolkien goes on to say that Aragorn looks to have grown in stature, while Éomer shrinks. In the face of Aragorn can be seen a brief vision of the power and majesty of the Kings of Stone, meaning Kings of Gondor, which is the land of stone or stone land. Legolas, with his keen perception as an elf, sees a white flame flickering on the brows of Aragorn, like a shining crown. Aragorn does not shy away from the threat of the riders, even when vastly outnumbered. They all look to him with sudden wonder and respect. Aragorn carries himself as a king before he is crowned. I detail this kingly behaviour in another video, of Aragorn and the Faint-Hearted, showing that while Sauron can claim to be a king of men, Aragorn acts as a king should. He carries himself in this way throughout the War of the Ring, inspiring those around him when faced with the threat of Mordor.
And last of all, Aragorn greeted Éomer of Rohan, and they embraced. And Aragorn said, "Between us there can be no word of giving or taking, nor of reward, for we are brethren. In happy hour did Eol ride from the north, and never has any league of people been more blessed, so that neither has ever failed the other, nor shall fail." And Éomer answered, "Since the day when you rose before me out of the green grass of the downs, I have loved you, and that love shall not fail."
This is not limited to the race of men, with the likes of Gimli the dwarf, Legolas the elf, and even Gandalf the wizard, a cloaked Maya, fighting for Aragorn. He's able to draw the enemies of Sauron together with no threat, no false promises, no lies. Sauron uses and abuses his great will to force others into servitude. Orcs, powerless to resist. Men, raised to hate the West. Treachery and lies. Aragorn, by comparison, has allies and friends who would sacrifice themselves to save him through fellowship, through friendship. Where Sauron rules through fear, terror, and an iron fist, Aragorn rightly rules through love, nobility, and healing. He has the ability and authority to reunite the great kingdoms in exile, Gondor and Arnor, restoring a royal line of kings and ushering in the Age of Men, as the race of elves continue to dwindle and leave the shores of Middle-earth. The heir of Isildur can undo centuries of decline within the race of men. His acceptance as the leader of the armies of the West against Sauron continues him on the path to becoming recognised as king. Sauron does not want this. He wants his enemies divided. He wants Gondor to continue without a king. And as said earlier, Sauron would claim such titles, but Aragorn would be welcomed by those he would rule, becoming a symbol of hope in the way of Sauron's path to victory.
Then Gandalf said,
"Let us not stay at the door, for the time is urgent. Let us enter, for it is only in the coming of Aragorn that any hope remains for the sick that lie in the house." Thus spake Eorith, wise woman of Gondor. The hands of the king are the hands of a healer, and so shall the rightful king be known.
All of these are reasons why Sauron would fear this one individual, but arguably Sauron's greatest fear in regards to Aragorn is that he is one of the few beings in Middle-earth who could claim the One Ring and lead a host to Mordor. Yes, Tolkien is clear that in the presence of Sauron, few of equal stature could hold the ring from him, and none of mortal race could. but Sauron would fear what Aragorn could do with the ring, the damage he could do if he took it for his own. With his newfound authority, his majesty would be a dark majesty. Hosts of men would fight for their powerful king, reminding us of kings like Ar-Pharazôn the Golden of Númenor, who terrified Sauron's forces in the past when leading hosts of grim men to Sauron's gates. All would fall under the banner of Aragorn, and the West would be united to overthrow Sauron for their new lord. Of course, we know that Aragorn would not do this, but Sauron did not believe anyone would destroy the ring over using it for its power, and he only cared about those who held power laying claim to the ring, as they would make the most use out of it. We know this from Gandalf's words to Frodo after being openly offered the ring. Sauron's fear took hold when Aragorn, through his authority as the rightful owner, took control of the Seeing Stone from the Dark Lord's grasp. Sauron, through his contest with Aragorn, believed he held the ring and was coming to Mordor, perhaps too soon. Unless some other seized it and became possessed of it. If that happened, the new possessor could, if sufficiently strong and heroic by nature, challenge Sauron, become master of all that he had learned or done since the making of the One Ring, and so overthrow him and usurp his place. Was Sauron justified in fearing Aragorn? Without Aragorn, Middle-earth most likely would have crumbled in defeat, and Sauron would stand victorious, even without gaining the One Ring. The importance of hope is throughout the Lord of the Rings, and Aragorn is a symbol of that hope. An entire volume of the novel is named after his return as king. He managed to cement a friendship and alliance with King Theoden of Rohan before Aragorn had even been crowned, and with Éomer, who would later become king following Theoden's death. Aragorn aided in the victory in the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, with his pilgrimage through Dunharrow with the Grey Company, recruiting the Oathbreakers, again through his authority, and removing the threat of the Corsair fleet, saving Gondor from Sauron's assault. Hope returned to men when Aragorn led the army of the West. He distracted Sauron by bringing a brave but small force to the Black Gate, risking an honourable death and sacrifice, to give Frodo a small chance to destroy the One Ring and end Sauron's tyranny. Aragorn played his part in the final defeat of the Dark Lord. And afterwards, we are told that he passed through flower-laden streets, entering the citadel, and with the unfurling of the banner of the tree and stars, the reign of Aragorn as King Elisar began, when the reign of Sauron ended, of which many songs have told. Did Sauron fear Aragorn? Absolutely. He was wise to fear him, with Aragorn standing alongside Frodo and Gandalf as one of the chief figures in the downfall of the Lord of the Rings. Thanks for watching this latest Tolkien questions and answers video. I encourage anyone to comment if they have a question or topic they'd like discussed in a future video. Most of these Q&A videos have been directly inspired through messages sent to me or conversations in comment sections. I also want to use this video to promote a recently launched Patreon page for this channel, which, don't worry, I won't mention on every video going forward. I've provided a link in the description. If you choose to support the channel, there are perks such as previews of videos, early access to finished videos, having a say in the topic of future videos, and access to community chat through Discord. As always, thanks to those supporting the channel through sharing videos or taking part in discussions in the comments. I'll see you next time.